Lootin', shootin', funny quips, more lootin' and shootin', and D&D references to boot. Tiny Tina Wonderlands is a Borderlands spin-off from Studio Gearbox. Is this new entry worth your time? Let's find out. Let me know in the comments down below if you have any questions about Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. I'll be sure to get back to you and help you with that decision-making purchase. Let's go.
It asks a question. Who are you?
I am a fate maker.
You answered smartly, baby!
Tiny Tina Wonderlands is coming to PS4, PS5, Xbox One, Series S, X, and PC on March 25th. Wonderlands is essentially Borderlands at its core, with some new RPG elements like picking a background in your character attributes to add to the Dungeons & Dragons inspiration that the game heavily draws from. I played Tiny Tina Wonderlands on a GTX 3080 and AMD 3800 XT, and overall my performance was extremely solid with all settings on ultra or high. I was hitting a solid 100 frames almost all of the time. However, the review build that we played crashed multiple times, and I experienced a lot of texture pop in, or a couple of times where my entire screen would literally just be a single color. I also had UI bugs where my pet would show as dead while they'd literally be flying in front of me. My quest log disappeared multiple times. Unfortunately, because of the embargo restrictions, we are only allowed to show you 2 areas of the game plus the first 2 hours, and most of these issues occurred outside of these points. In Wonderlands, there is no traditional open world that you will come to expect from a Borderlands game. There's no vehicles either. Instead, you will traverse the world through the overworld map. This map will allow you to travel between small open spaces that will hold quests and other side objectives. On the overworld itself, there are quests and optional encounters that can be completed to obtain permanent buffs or open additional areas in the overworld map. Wonderlands relies heavily on this encounters mechanic that is essentially battle arenas where you need to kill a certain amount of enemies to pass that encounter. For some of these challenges, you will need to complete multiple of these encounters in a row in order to retrieve the shrine piece or the quest item at the end. These encounters become increasingly frustrating throughout my playthrough, as there is no real challenge to defeating the enemies. They just spawn too slowly or too spread out for it to be a difficult or engaging encounter. Towards the end of my 20 to 25 hours with the game, I skipped as many of these as I could just to get through the end of the content. The small open world areas are some of the most visually stunning environments I've seen in a Borderlands game. The cel-shaded art style is perfect for this fantasy sci-fi mashup, and the new locations are diverse and enjoyable to explore. These areas contain side quests and side objectives to complete. However, there is only a small amount of these open world areas in the game itself. The quests here are your typical fetch quests or kill enemies quests that you'd come to expect from a Borderlands game. As always, Borderlands questing is carried heavily by its stellar writing and voice cast.
Is this working for you? I want you to hate you. I'm talking true loathing, like an absolute rage smoldering within, hollowing you out like a house fire. Just let me know if there's anything else I can do. Mentor figures I can kill. I'm all ears.
Gearbox clearly knows what they are going for with this trio that you will hear in your ear through the entire game. Ashley Burge as Tina is hilarious and surprisingly a strong enough character to carry a story on her own. Tina is paired with Andy Samberg playing Valentine and Wanda Sykes as Fret. These comic trio is so well balanced as they bounce off each other to deliver comments on the game world and the actions that are taking place. Their quips and banter are the true highlights and standouts of this entire experience, and I'd almost recommend playing Wonderlands just to hear the 3 of them speak, as it is a perfect balance between teasing each other and the quips about the game world that you are experiencing in front of you.
As the mimic dies, it belches out the Tome of Fate. You're gonna have to read it aloud on the altar outside.
My old nemesis. Reading? Out loud.
Will Arnett as the Dragon Lord is also great, but severely underutilized as he disappears for hours at a time when completing the side content. The weapons all have great sounds to them, as you'd come to expect from a Borderlands game, all about shooting and looting, and I did encounter a number of audio bugs where dialogue just wouldn't play, or my character would just randomly say lines all of the time that had absolutely no relevance to what I was doing. Borderlands has always been known for its guns, and that theme is ever present here, with many new weapons and designs to fit the D&D inspiration of the Wonderlands. For the first time in a Borderlands game, you will also be equipping a melee weapon of your choice. Adding a weapon like this, I was hoping that the melee combat would be significantly more developed, so I picked the Clawbringer as my main class to try and smack enemies with my hammer for my playthrough. I was left pretty disappointed that the melee combat is still tied to a button press. There's no unique combos or animations you can perform besides provides the ground slam, and the further you get into the game, the more significant the disadvantage is to be a melee-focused build due to the flying enemies and the large bosses that are often too far away to melee. Ranged combat is very satisfying, and I really enjoyed tinkering with different weapons to see what their effects were and how they altered my playstyle. Legendary weapons add to this by having unique effects, like a fire assault rifle I found that would launch wyverns at your enemy when you reload. The new weapon types, the new enemies, and the environments are all fun and engaging throughout. It's just a shame that there are so few open areas to explore.
So, how's that tuchus doing? Is it okay? Wouldn't want to damage your glorious glutes.
Wonderlands has 6 starting classes, which I'll have a guide coming out for at launch, by the way, and you will later be able to choose a secondary class from the remaining 5 classes. Wonderlands also introduces attributes, which is heavily inspired by the D&D attributes, and you'll pick a background which will affect your attribute totals, and the attributes seem to replace the Guardian rank system from Borderlands 3, and at each level you will get a hero point to add to an attribute of your choice. I never felt the weight of these stat increases actually doing anything tangible other than just seeing the number go up, unfortunately. For the story, you play as the newbie in the real world with Tina and the Fate Maker in the Wonderlands. As the Fate Maker, you're tasked with the classic hero defeats villain storyline as you take down the Dragon Lord. Unfortunately, the story doesn't develop much beyond this point as you explore the overworld and get closer to your objective. There is no real twists or turns along the way. It's very much a means to an end rather than trying to tell a compelling story, which is fine. In universe, technically, this story was made by Tina herself, and the jokes and the banter throughout definitely carry the narrative enough to overlook some of its complexity shortcomings. Side content can be very hit and miss. Some will have you just fetch an item, while others will have hilarious moments that I found myself really enjoying and laughing out loud at. There are multiple moments where you'll be eagerly awaiting an NPC to stop talking and tell you what to do next while you're just standing there for 1 to 2 minutes while the NPC gives you some exposition or some pop culture reference that may be enjoyable, may not be enjoyable, but you're simply just standing there waiting to move on with nothing left to do. After the story, you will unlock the Chaos Chamber endgame mode, and this mode is essentially a roguelike repeatable mode where you complete those encounters mentioned earlier over and over again while getting various buffs and debuffs each run that make each encounter harder and increase your chance of better loot. I've actually enjoyed my time with this mode much more than I enjoyed the general encounters that you get throughout the main narrative. Each run is unique, and grinding for that possibility of better gear is a very rewarding carrot on a stick, and each encounter does have a unique effect to it that can make it feel fresh every time you do go and complete these encounters. Unfortunately, we can't show you any of the Chaos Chamber, so we'll just play the trailer here because it does contain story spoilers. I rate games on a buy, wait, or ignore scale, and Tiny Tina Wonderlands is a game that Borderlands fans, I think, will ultimately be happy with. There is enough change here for it to be a refreshing take on the Borderlands formula. However, this is a wait. There are too many bugs, not a compelling enough narrative, and too much repetitive content here for it to be worth rushing out to play this on day one, although the stellar comedic writing does make this an experience well worth having one day. Let me know any questions you have about Tiny Tina's Wonderlands in the comments, and I'll be sure to get back to you. Thank you for watching this video till the end. Thank you to our members for supporting the channel. My name is NorZZa, and I hope you have a great day.